time doing this and make sure that it's working for everybody. If for some reason you can't see us on YouTube, this will be posted after. One moment, it's loading for everyone on YouTube. Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. We're back on YouTube. For some reason, if you're on YouTube and you can't see us, let us know and I'll try and reshare everything with you. All right, back to our PowerPoint. So thanks again, Melanie, for your story. So the real reason everyone's here, what are plankton and why should we care about them? I have actually been lucky enough to travel the ocean twice and study plankton. I sailed from Woods Hole to Ireland and then from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean, doing plankton sampling. We're going to show you a little bit about how that's done in a little while. But when most people think of plankton, they actually think of plankton from SpongeBob, which is totally incorrect as the cartoon. But plankton from SpongeBob is actually a copepod, which is a type of plankton we're going to learn about today. Plankton by itself just means anything that cannot swim against a current in the ocean. They are ocean drifters, meaning that they are going with the flow. It's a name that comes from Greek, meaning wanderer or drifter. And ocean creatures that can swim against the current, we call those nekton. So there are two types of plankton that we're going to concentrate on. The first type are phytoplankton. The second type are zooplankton. So phytoplankton are the base of our marine food web. We call them primary producers. Without phytoplankton, we wouldn't have the oxygen that we breathe. The entire ocean really wouldn't thrive. Our entire globe wouldn't thrive. Phytoplankton do spend their entire life cycle as plankton. We definitely need a microscope to see them. And they provide more than half the oxygen that we breathe. So every other breath that you take is thankful to these little tiny photosynthetic creatures. And if you are providing oxygen, you are sequestering carbon. So they are photosynthesizers. And they are responsible for rocks, sand, oil, and your face. And I say your face because some of the first organisms on our planet were these photosynthetic bacteria, phytoplankton. Oil, we all know that we need fossil fuels, and we're going to learn a little bit about how plankton makes it to the sea floor and how it gets sequestered down there and under a lot of pressure turns into our fossil fuels. And then sand and rocks, we're going to learn a little bit more too, but most plankton have elements that contribute to those. For zooplankton, these are our primary consumers in the ocean, kind of like the cows of the sea. They graze on all the phytoplankton like cows would graze on grass in a meadow. And they some of them spend their whole life as plankton, and others actually grow out of their planktonic stage and grow up to be things like lobsters and crabs. Some are super small and some are ginormous. And they are really abundant. So the creature that plankton from SpongeBob is based off of, the copepod, if we were to put one of them in every liter of ocean water, we would have 10 to the 21 of them out there in the ocean, which is probably an underestimate of what is out there. But we're thankful for all of them. So a little more about these phytoplankton. We have three main types that, again, all need sunlight because they photosynthesize. The first are coccolithophores, and these are made primarily out of calcium carbonate, which if you think of the White Cliffs of Dover or some chalky substance, when there's a big bloom of them, the water actually gets kind of chalky, and they can remake their shell every 15 minutes, which is pretty impressive. They are really concentrated in northern cold waters. And then we have diatoms, which are the sandy substances. They're made out of silica, and silica can be turned into things like glass and cement over time. And then we have oil droplets. They have oil droplets that can help control their buoyancy in the water column. They can't swim. They drift in the water, but the oil will help them move up and down in the water column. And then we have dinoflagellates, which are actually super cool because they can eat other plankton if they want, and they have a little flagella that helps them move up and down in the water column as well. And the picture there is showing you a red tide event. Dinoflagellates tend to be the species or type of phytoplankton that are most often found in red tides. One moment, it looks like we have another message here. So how big are phytoplankton? I really like this diagram. It's from a paper that the author was Finkel in 2010, and it's showing us the size range of phytoplankton. Now, when we think of phytoplankton, we're thinking of really tiny photosynthetic creatures, but within one drop of water, we can have many different types of those phytoplanktons, and they can range anywhere from the small end of our coccus family all the way up to our trichodosium, the really large plankton. And if we put that in a scale of things that we can see as humans without a microscope, the small end would be like a sardine or something that you'd find on a salad, and the large end would be the trichodosium being at Manhattan. So if we had one drop of water, we could have a phytoplankton the size of a little tiny fish and a phytoplankton the size of Manhattan in the same drop of water, which is crazy. So it is a really diverse community, even though they are all tiny. And then we have zooplankton that spend their whole life as plankton, like the krill on the right here, and we call those holoplankton. And then we have meroplankton, which are the zooplankton that grow up to be other things, like our spiny lobster larva on the left of the screen here. So then we have zooplankton that are super tiny, just a few millimeters in size, like our Daphnia. There are freshwater species of these as well, but this is the marine version. And then we actually have these really large jellyfish chains that can be greater than 100 feet. So think of the size of a blue whale. These are found pretty deep in the ocean. They are plankton because they're in the jellyfish family. They go with the flow. And where do plankton live? Well, our phytoplankton, our photosynthetic creatures, they're going to live in what we call the photic zone of the ocean. And the photic zone is where light can reach. And phytoplankton obviously needs sunlight to survive. But our zooplankton can go all the way down into the mesopelagic zone of the ocean, down to around 1,000 meters, where some of those jellyfish live. And a lot of our zooplankton will do a vertical migration every single day. So during the daylight, when they can be eaten by bigger creatures that rely on them for their food source, our zooplankton will travel down in the water column to a deeper depth and hide where there's less sunlight so that they don't get eaten. And then at night, they'll come up and graze on all of that phytoplankton. And this is just showing you that in a scientific diagram. It's a little complicated, and I know there's a lot of lines going on, but I just want you to concentrate on the light here, just to show you that we can measure how much light there is going down, and that will show us where we can find the most phytoplankton in the water column, which we measure by chlorophyll, which is over here. And you'll notice, which might be surprising to you, that the highest levels of our phytoplankton aren't right at the top. They're actually down right over here in the 80, 100 meters, and this changes all over the place. This is in Bermuda, but we can measure where we can go find those phytoplankton, and the reason for that is that this is where we have more nutrients which are being brought up from the bottom of the ocean. And ways that we can find where phytoplankton are globally are through satellite imagery. Phytoplankton have chlorophyll just like leaves or grass would on terrestrial systems. So we can look for that pigment in the ocean and look for where that concentration changes. You'll notice through this simulation that we have higher rates of chlorophyll, which are going to correspond to primary production and phytoplankton in our coastal systems because there's more nutrients there. And really not in our gyres, which we call oligotrophic zones of the ocean, because there aren't a lot of nutrients there. And phytoplankton really need nutrients to be able to survive, just like your garden or golf courses would need to keep that really green color going. This is just a little bit more of a simplified version of that. And you can see the difference between our summer months on the left and our winter months on the right. And we have much higher levels of chlorophyll in the summer months, which again respond to more plankton. And you'll notice on the bottom here, we have actually nitrate concentrations, which are our nitrogen concentrations in the ocean. And these are a lot lower in the summer months because they're getting eaten up by our plankton. So how do we collect plankton? I was actually lucky enough to go out a few days ago on one of the nicer days and keep my distance from everybody and go out and get some plankton. So did a little video for you on how we collect plankton.
Hi guys, this is Jeffrey here down at the Center Hill Preserve OPAC's headquarters. I know we're in a pretty difficult time right now and we're all stuck inside, so I hope we outside freezing right now will give you a little bit of inspiration to do some science at home. Today's webinar is all about plankton, and we're actually going to show you how we go and catch or collect plankton samples when we bring them into the classroom. What you see here in my hand, this is the plankton that we're going to use. What you're going to see me do is drag this behind me, and what that's going to do is collect everything in the water except really tiny microscopic stuff in what we call a cod jar. And then we're going to take our sample from our cod and put it in a sample jar, and then we'll be able to see everything we caught under the microscope. And yeah, let's do it.
All right. So expectations for catching plankton is that it's going to be a lot of fun all the time. Reality, it's cold and wet. And at our headquarters in Plymouth, it's actually really rocky. So you have to be careful when you're out there and that you're not slipping on anything while you're catching plankton. But this is what we actually ended up with. Our sample, you can see all those plankton around in there. Most of those are those pods, which really quickly, they can actually jump about 500 times their body length. So these are some highlights from our toe. On the left there, you have a jellyfish. And on the right, that's actually a barnacle larva trying to find its home. It's one of the last stages of their planktonic life before they grasp onto a hard surface. So it's pretty cool to catch that in our toe. Sorry if you're on the chat here, I can't get it to pop up. For some reason, it will not show me what you are saying, but I just want to leave this up there for a second because it's really fun to watch. You can see that both of these zooplankton are trying to filter in all of the plankton that are in the water column because zooplankton are filter feeders. They're just trying to get all the yummy nutrients that the phytoplankton have so that they can keep going. And we did get these under our microscope a couple days ago. I can post these videos after for you as well. So you saw how I would catch our plankton samples if we were bringing them to the classroom. It was a really small net. That net has really tiny holes. So that really small net probably had millions of holes. They're microns in size, like the width of your hair. But when we're out at sea, we have a much bigger net, so we can have a more diverse sample and more stuff. You'll see this is a picture from when I was doing sampling with Sea Education Association on one of those trips I was telling you about earlier. You can see how big that net is. This is the boat here, and just kind of zoomed in. It's a much larger net. And again, just to put from perspective there, that's myself and how big that net is. So now we've learned a little bit about what plankton are. The other half of this is why you should care about them. And plankton are important to us because we like to eat seafood and we like to breathe and we like to have a temperate climate where we're not too cold and we're not too warm. It's kind of like the Goldilocks effect, right? We want to have the perfect meal all the time. Why do we have so much plankton in the ocean? Well, we lose a lot of energy as we move through our food web, but you'll just see in this figure that everything is reliant on that phytoplankton blooming and growing as we move through the system. And because these plankton are grazers, they actually end up eating everything that's in front of them. And this video is really cool because all those dyed things in the water are plastic pellets. This is a copepod showing you how it eats and how it is filtering microplastics through its system. So if you were a copepod and you're swimming, jumping around, drifting through the ocean, and you were trying to find all the diatoms and those dinoflagellates and coccolithophores, all that yummy phytoplankton to eat, you're going to also be pushing in whatever else is in the water. And this is just showing you that now that we have tons of plastic in our ocean, even the planktonic level of our food web is absorbing those microplastics. I'll show you that again. Those bright green dots are microplastics. You can see the copepod filtering those in. So there's something. So what goes in the ocean goes in you if you are eating seafood. Because if you're a small fish, you're going to be eating the copepods that just ate that plastic. And then you have our tunas and our sharks and our dolphins and our whales that are also eating everything up the food web. And everyone's kind of seen this typical food chain figure in any ecosystem. This is our ocean, but I like to add to it that we also have plastic in that system now. So we have our primary consumers, our zooplankton that are eating plastic. We have our secondary consumers that are also eating plastic in the ocean, some bigger pieces. We even have our big tuna, our swordfish, our sharks, our whales that are eating plastic as well. And there's evidence of that that we've found in the guts of these creatures, which is really sad. But it's just something that we like to highlight, that plastic doesn't go away. It gets smaller and smaller, and it is part of our marine food web now. And we need to do something about that. So plankton, carbon, and whale poop. Wait, what? Whale poop. So plankton is really important for the oxygen that we breathe. And as we saw for the whole marine food web, when we're talking about carbon, our phytoplankton are drawing in that CO2 when they're photosynthesizing. And that's going to hold that carbon in the ocean. However, it's not just as simple as phytoplankton taking in carbon and then it's forever in the ocean. Those phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton, as we saw, and then those zooplankton can die and sink down to the bottom. Those phytoplankton could die themselves and sink to the bottom, and then all of the mixing in the ocean from the currents can push that carbon back up. So there's a lot of ways that that carbon might not make it down to the seafloor where it might be forever in the ocean. And this is just a nice figure showing you how complex the carbon cycle is. And this is by no means anything that you need to memorize or walk away with, but I do want you to walk away with knowing that the carbon cycle is very complex in the ocean, and phytoplankton are definitely a way that we can draw carbon out of the atmosphere, but it's not as simple as just having more phytoplankton means that we have more carbon taken out of the atmosphere. It's a lot more complex than that. And this is just one way to show you that. On the left here, there's a little figure of the flows of carbon, and you can see that it's a slow system, and that the ocean eventually can be a good carbon sink, or a place where we store carbon over time. But it's a slow process annually. And on the right here, this is an example of how, again, what we saw in the last figure, but how nutrients are mixing through the ecosystem or the food web. And that gets us to the whale poop here. So one way that we can fertilize the ocean so that we get more phytoplankton is through whale poop. Whales will swim down to deep depths to eat food. And a good example of that are sperm whales in the Southern Ocean. They'll go down trying to find squid and things to eat. And when they're down there, they're taking all the carbon that those creatures have absorbed through their food consumption. And then the whale comes back up to breathe, because they are mammals, and they poop. And that poop is full of all of those wonderful nutrients. And then when there's enough sunlight, our phytoplankton bloom, and we have that wonderful system of our carbon moving around the ocean. And I have a fun article for you at the end here that you can read a little bit more about that system, but I think it's really cool. So one more thing here, how is climate change impacting plankton? So we said that phytoplankton can draw carbon out of the atmosphere. However, the more carbon we put into the ocean can mess up things like plankton abundance, community structure, and the timing of when those plankton bloom and where they live, partly because as the temperature in our globe rises, that is messing with how many nutrients can be absorbed in water, and how that water is moving and through current systems around the globe. The more carbon we put in the ocean through that sequestration is also increasing the acidity of the ocean, which can impact the growth rates of our plankton. Remember, they're made out of calcium carbonate and silica. The dinoflagellates have a lot of cellulose plates. So these are all things that can be impacted by ocean acidity. And plankton abundance can be changed because our fish are moving with temperatures as well. And if we have less plankton, we're probably going to have less food through the fisheries, because there won't be as much to eat out there. And all of this really goes back to the fact, if we warm our oceans, we're going to have less nutrients, because colder water actually holds more nutrients. So things like oxygen and nitrogen and carbon, which will mean less plankton over time. So this is a big list of follow-up activities that I have for you so that you can keep learning about plankton at home. I have put all of this on our website, but I just want to go through it quickly, and then we're going to have some time for some Q&A. First off, please submit questions and pictures of artwork that you make throughout the week on our Facebook and Twitter page. If you haven't liked those, please do. You'll be able to see about future webinars that we're hosting, as well as our summer workshops here in Massachusetts. But some of these other activities, while you're at home, you can actually track and record chlorophyll concentrations in the ocean. There's some great resources there from NASA. The second one is also from NASA, but it's through their Ocean Color web database. And through both of those, you can see daily chlorophyll concentrations in the ocean. And I have an activity there where you can go through and look at how chlorophyll concentrations change seasonally. Worksheet will explain that a little bit more. We have started a little competition here for you. I'd love for you to keep learning about plankton by going out and finding 3 plankton species, learning how they adapt to their environments, what makes them unique compared to other plankton, and then use what you've learned to design your own plankton. And then take a picture of that and post it on our Facebook page, and let's see how many different plankton we can create this week. We talked a little bit about plastic. Plastic sadly just doesn't go away, but a lot of it does end up in our ocean, as well as with other common household things. So we have another worksheet here that's going to tell you a little bit about how long things last in the ocean before they go away. And by defining going away, we mean they're to the point where we can't see them with our eyes. So you can see that on that worksheet. There are a few open art contests out there for ocean artworks. So if you are really proud of your plankton, you can submit it to one of those, or you can read all the details about those art contests, and encourage you to submit your artwork there. And then there's a great film on Netflix called A Plastic Ocean. It can teach you a little bit more about marine pollution that's out there. There are also more marine debris resources through the Ocean Conservancy. A lot of the pictures that I had on this webinar are thanks to Dr. Richard Kirby, and he has a wonderful, I think it's about 15-minute short film on plankton that's on the link there, which is again on our website. And you can learn more about carbon pathways and how whale poop helps fertilize the ocean through those stories there. And then there's a wonderful organization out in LA that shared with me their oceanography lessons that they have free on their website, and that's the link there. So this is just an example of what you can do to build your own plankton at home. This is a copepod, but again, we're encouraging you to design your own plankton, come up with a name, where it lives, why it's awesome. All right, so thank you again for learning a little bit about plankton and why they're important to us and our planet. And then this is the time that I'd like to open it up for some questions. So let's see what we can do here. I'm going to look back in our chat here and see if we had any questions come up that I have missed. Let's see. Looks like everyone could hear us. That was great. So I have a question here. If the plankton can turn into lobsters like in the video, are plankton considered as ancestors or descendants of all the ocean creatures? No, our first ocean creatures were those photosynthetic bacteria, so they were really tiny, and everything has evolved from that, not from lobsters themselves. Lobsters just will hatch and turn into lobsters down the line. Let's see what else we got here. What will happen if plankton goes extinct? We will go extinct. That's half of our oxygen out there, and our carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere would go skyrocketing. That's a great question. Thank you. These are coming in really fast. Let's see what else we've got here. What inspired me to learn about plankton? Believe it or not, when I started college, I was an economics major, and I had to take some science classes thanks to my school requiring us to have a liberal arts education. And the class I chose was Intro to Oceanography, my first semester, and I instantly fell in love with the ocean. And the professor that was teaching it, she was a biogeochemist, which is a fancy word for how nutrients cycle through an ecosystem. And when you're talking about nutrients, you're talking about plankton, and a lot of my undergrad work then focused on plankton. Another question here, what is the best thing that kids can do to help plankton? Best thing that you can do is know about them. You can keep exploring different species. You can go out there and collect them. There's a lot of really great citizen science efforts out there, which I have included on our website as well, that you can go out and do water quality testing and see how healthy that plankton ecosystem is. Let's see, what else do we have? What can we collect plankton with if we don't have a fancy net? You can collect plankton with pantyhose. That's probably the easiest way to do it without a fancy net. And there are some instructions that you can find online on how to do that. How long did it take you to get a degree? For me, it took 5 years because I took a gap year to go sailing and learn all about plankton. But typically you can get a marine science degree in 4 years for your bachelor's. What else do we have here? What did you mean by plankton in your face? No, plankton's not in our face. Our faces have evolved because everything has evolved from plankton. Question, is there plankton in ponds? I have a pond in my backyard. Yes, there are freshwater plankton species. If you go onto our Design Your Own Plankton worksheet, there is a link there to phytoplankton species, and on that there are quite a few freshwater species that you can investigate. And if you have some pantyhose at home and you can stay away from people to social distance, you can go see if you can find some yourself. Is there plankton in my drinking water? No, our drinking water is hopefully filtered out. There are no living organisms in there, planktonic organisms. What about in a half dried up bog? Are there plankton in that? There might be some types of bacteria that are photosynthesizing in there for sure. Where's the map behind you? That is Block Island Sound. So yes, that is Rhode Island. Great question here. How do plankton reproduce? Plankton actually, if you're a phytoplankton, you are reproducing through the nutrients and the sunlight in the water. If you're a zooplankton, you are usually hatching some eggs. What happens if you eat plankton? Not much. If you've been to the water and you've swallowed some salt water, you probably had some plankton yourself. I have another question. Do plankton eat bacteria? I'm sure, yes, zooplankton eat bacteria because we saw that they can even eat microplastics. They are just filtering everything that's in the water. Do we have any other classes? OPAC has 3 more webinars this week. We have one on ocean adaptations, we have one on horseshoe crabs, and we have one on marine protected areas. How many eggs do plankton lay? They can lay a lot of eggs. On the Ocean Drifters website through Dr. Kirby, there are some pictures of copepods that have their egg sacs attached to them. That's one way to see that. Can plankton live in cold climates like Antarctica? Yes, plankton actually really thrive in our polar regions in the summer months when there's sunlight for them to be there. Plankton just needs sunlight and nutrients to get going. What else do we have? All right, I'm not seeing any more serious questions here. One more, what is the most common type of plankton? That would probably, for zooplankton, be the copepod. Again, they're probably 1 copepod in every liter of ocean water out there, which is great. Back. So lastly here, things that you can do at home to advocate for the ocean. You can learn how to make your own Secchi disc, which is the way that we measure turbidity in the water. And when we're looking at turbidity, that's going to help us see how much stuff is in the water, which will help us see how much phytoplankton is in the water. You can learn how to do that on the link there. You can conduct a local beach cleanup when it's safe to do so and track what you find. There are many different resources for you to post that. You can skip the straws at home, the other single-use plastics, so that those don't end up in the ocean. You can bring OPAC to your classroom, and you can register for an OPAC summer workshop if you are here in Massachusetts. And above all, you can just be the voice the ocean needs. If people aren't talking about ocean issues, there isn't going to be awareness out there for them. So thank you again for tuning in today. If you haven't yet, please like us on our social media platforms. This will help you stay up to date on the webinars that we're doing this week, as well as future events. And we might be adding some more webinars next week as well. It looks like we're going to be home for a while. And we are able to offer these webinars for free, thanks to all of our supporters. So if you liked what you saw, we do encourage you to help us keep offering ocean education at the lowest price possible. You can find out ways to help us on our website. So thank you so much for joining us again. I'm gonna tune out and I'll keep answering everybody's questions on our social media platforms. Sorry if there were any technical difficulties today. This was our first time doing this, and we will try our best to improve tomorrow. Thank you so much. Bye.